Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this AVPN webinar, Shifts in Chinese Private Sector Giving, Pandemic Philanthropy, China and Technology. By way of introduction, my name is Cindy Wan. I'm a consultant of AVPN working in China. Very glad to welcome you here today. Today, we live in a world that 6 months ago would be unimaginable. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every single one of us living on this planet. Governments, businesses, and civil societies across the world have made multifaceted efforts to curb the spread of the virus, save lives, support small businesses, test new drugs, just to name a few. Giving from the Chinese private sector has shown a new trend, as illustrated in the report recently released by Bridge Consulting, an AVPN member based in Beijing, China. We all look forward to hearing more of how this trend has the potential to reshape China's philanthropic sector and contribute positively to the collaborative international efforts. Today's webinar will start with a keynote presentation by Angel Tai of Bridge Consulting. Then we'll have a panel discussion moderated by Andre Shen, founder and CEO of Bridge Consulting. Following that, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A before this webinar ends. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom app during the presentation and the panel discussion. You can also scan the QR code shown on the screen right now to read the report. Without further ado, let me introduce today's keynote speaker, Angel Tai. Angel is the Associate Director of Bridge Consulting, where she heads its global health and development efforts with the key international clients and partners, including GAVI, and the Global Partnership for Education. Now, the floor is yours, Angel.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and hi, everyone. It's my honor to be sharing a report that we at Bridge Consulting had written earlier in June, exploring what we saw as a growing trend of funding from Chinese donors going towards R&D as the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded. But first, a little bit about Bridge. We're a mission-driven, issue-based strategy and communications consultancy based in Beijing and part of a wider New York City headquartered global health strategies network. We're very privileged to be working with some of the leading Chinese and global actors in global health and development. And we very much believe that China's philanthropic community has both the potential and capacity to play a greater role in advancing development both domestically and globally. Like our name suggests, we very much see ourselves as a bridge between China and the world. And it's with this mission and aspiration that we've worked with AVPN and our distinguished panelists to put together this webinar today. So we're very glad to be sharing about what we're seeing as an emerging trend in this space and believe this wave of interest and funding for medical R&D not only means something to China, but also to the world. So before we go into the presentation proper, we thought we'd do a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you. So in a few seconds, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. And you can go ahead and answer the two questions we've prepared. So the first one is, which industry are you from? And the second one is, has your organization made contributions towards medical R&D since COVID-19? So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds or so to respond, and then we'll all get to see the results shortly after. Maybe about 10 more seconds for as many people to respond, and then we can go ahead and see the results. All right, shall we see the results? Great. Wow. Okay. It looks like the majority of you are from nonprofit or foundations, a vast majority actually. And in terms of making contributions, quite a spread. While majority have not made contributions towards medical R&D, it looks like quite a few have made contributions to non-R&D areas, so PPE and so on. Yeah, and well, a good 15% has donated towards medical R&D with further donations in store. So yeah, it looks like a really good spread. Thank you so much for responding. All right, back to my presentation. So my presentation today will cover, oops, let me get the control. Oops, sorry, give me a second. All right, okay. Whoa, this is moving too quickly. So sorry, guys. Okay, my presentation today will cover beyond an introduction and what the philanthropic donations to COVID-19 R&D have looked like, also a little bit of background on the evolution of Chinese philanthropy and the growth of China's R&D capability, and importantly, how these two factors play into the trend that we're exploring. And finally, our take on the long-term impact of COVID-19 on Chinese R&D philanthropy. So first of all, why did we study this? So sorry, guys. We're having a little bit of Yep, so sorry once again. So why did we study this? Well, it's really a combination of factors. First, as after announcement of R&D donations started coming through, we saw what was potentially becoming a watershed moment in Chinese philanthropy. At the same time, this was happening at a time when China is growing in its role as a development partner, with corporate and individual foundations growing in both numbers and scale. And finally, that China's science and technology has grown by leaps and bounds, especially in the recent decade. More on these factors later in my presentation, but essentially, these led us to a bunch of key questions that we covered in the report. Yep, so firstly, how much have philanthropists given and to whom? Secondly, how have people noticed this trend? How have they responded, especially traditional and social media? And thirdly, how does the COVID-19 response build on existing trends in Chinese philanthropy? Can China be the source of competitive R&D? How does Chinese science and technology compare globally? And finally, how is this trend likely to develop as the pandemic continues? What will be the key factors that will determine whether this will last? But first, a little bit on methodology and key terms. For methodology, we really was mainly doing an analysis of academic and industry literature and a review of both traditional and social media. And on key terms, philanthropy and private sector are two kind of recurring terms you'll be hearing over the course of the presentation. For philanthropy, we're referring to private capital from companies or individuals to public good causes without direct monetary or commercial benefit. So this could be long-term, but there isn't a direct mechanism to ensure it. And then for private sector, it's a bit of a tricky term in China, but we're really referring to companies that the state at the national, provincial, and municipal level does not own or formally direct. So as most of you would recall, what had started as a small but concerning outbreak in Wuhan, China in December quickly evolved into a rapidly spreading epidemic, eventually leading to a lockdown of parts of Hubei on January 23rd. In the months that followed, though, there was a large-scale mobilization of private philanthropy in China. Although a lot of this money went to immediate social and medical relief efforts, an estimated 5 to 10% of the giving was actually directed at R&D efforts that sought to develop vaccines, antiviral drugs, and other therapeutic treatments. And in terms of sources, this came from corporates, individuals, academic sources, as well as foundations, so a pretty wide range. But the tech and real estate sector dominated from what we were seeing, with notable donations from Evergrande Group, which is a big real estate conglomerate in China, the Alibaba founder, Jack Ma, Baidu, as well as Tencent. And these total funds contributed by Chinese philanthropy to R&D are now estimated at a whopping 1.8 billion RMB, which loosely translates to over 250 million US dollars. And in terms of destination of giving, they were mostly directed at Chinese institutions with elite reputations. So an example is Tsinghua University that received quite a bit of these funds. Though a small and notable share of giving was also directed internationally. So an example of this is from the Jack Ma Foundation, which donated funds to teams at Columbia University in the US and also the Peter Doherty Institute in Australia. Donations were also split between those who were given to research groups of specific academics, as well as those that went to institutions in general. So this is an extract of the table that we had put together and gives you a bit of a sense of the scale as well as the destinations of giving. And how did people react to these donations? This was, after all, an estimated 1.8 billion RMB total that was going to a rather specific form of philanthropy. While reactions were largely positive, with some differences between state media, private media, and the public. So state media commentary mostly portrayed donors as playing their part in the national effort, reinforcing the government's narrative of China as a responsible nation. Private media and general public, they were still largely positive, but they were more focused on the donors as individuals, so calling out the individuals that had made large donations, with some also expressing skepticism towards the motives behind these donations. The donations, interestingly, also gained traction globally on channels like CNN and BBC, but with similar spotlight on individual personalities like Jack Ma or ByteDance's Zhang Yiming. And at this point, you might be wondering, where did this all come from? Where was it before COVID-19? Was this already a trend? Well, let's take a quick walk back in history. So back to 1978, when the large-scale Deng Xiaoping-driven economic reforms began, these moves actually saw GDP growth soaring in China, and it allowed for the emergence of private capital. This has really been the engine for the emergence of private and corporate fortunes and the basis for today's philanthropy. The Sichuan earthquake, as some of you might recall, in 2008, sparked a huge increase in corporate philanthropy in China. Actually, within 10 days of the earthquake, Chinese firms had donated 1.6 billion RMB to the cause. And since then, charitable giving in China has really been growing steadily. This chart shows it. As you can see, there's a steady growth since 2008 all the way until 2017, and it continues till today. And what role has the Chinese government played in all of this? Well, before the reforms that we talked about earlier, the state was very much dominant with little or no role for private philanthropy. But charities started emerging from the 1980s, but even then were largely government controlled. I would say this really changed mainly with the introduction of the charity law in 2016, where for the first time, the government officially recognized the significance of private philanthropy. But today, the government still very much defines priority issues. So as some of you are aware, or more who are focused more in China would know, poverty alleviation currently ranks pretty high, on the government's philanthropy agenda. In terms of trends and focus causes for Chinese philanthropy, traditionally, actually, education has been the largest cause for donors, followed by poverty alleviation. But at the same time, there's been new trends emerging to underfunded causes as well that have been resonating with the younger generation. So examples include entrepreneurship or climate change. But very much limited funds have been directed to health or scientific research to date. So you see in this chart, it provides a bit of an idea of how the trends have shifted over time, but very much dominated by education, social welfare, poverty alleviation, and health would really take up the other kind of bar that you would see. And as you can see, this is really hasn't really been a focus area. What we're seeing in the last couple of months is really something quite new to this space in China. And importantly, COVID-19 comes at a time of tremendous growth in China's science and technology sector. Since the revival of Chinese universities in 1978, China has seen its science and technology sector grow exponentially. China now actually awards more PhDs than anywhere in the world. It's the highest number of researchers. It's the second largest spender on R&D. It's got the largest number of published articles and the highest number of patents globally. And across science and technology in China, and actually more specifically pharmaceutical and the vaccine industry, China has steadily progressed from a Me Too phase, where they're replicating known technologies, to increasingly the Me Better phase, where it's moving, improving known technologies. And more so what we're seeing is progress towards the Me First phase. And that's innovation based on scientific breakthroughs from the country itself. A really good example of that is actually China's Japanese encephalitis vaccine. It's a vaccine for a disease that still today remains without cure. Independently developed in China, this became the first Japanese encephalitis vaccine in the world to be pre-qualified for pediatric use. So pre-qualified is when it's approved for UN purchase. And it was also the first ever China-made vaccine to be pre-qualified by WHO at all. And this really opened the door for China's involvement as a global development partner in the vaccine field. So while only 4 vaccines have received this certification to date, there are actually several in the pipeline and a clear sign of China's growing capacity in this space. Actually, at the Global Vaccine Summit in June this year, for example, ahead of a projected global shortage of HPV vaccines, 2 other Chinese vaccine manufacturers were actually part of a group of 5 that pledged increasing and prioritizing HPV vaccines to supply GAVI-supported countries. And finally, our take on the long-term impact. Do we think this trend is here to stay? Well, given the importance of R&D in global health and development, we're very much hopeful that this trend will sustain beyond the pandemic. But there are a couple of factors at play that could impact the direction this takes, and they can be seen as economic, political, motivational, and structural. So let's start with economic. The economic downturn that we're seeing across the world in many areas that COVID-19 has caused will likely put pressure on many businesses. So we're seeing, this might put potential restrictions on the amount of private capital that could flow to philanthropy. But at the same time, possible cutbacks in public spending on R&D could also lead to more political pressure on donors to fill that gap. But politically, international debate over questions of blame that we're seeing right now in the public arena, that could also put more pressure on the Chinese end to pour even more funding into R&D. The increase in China's scientific R&D capacity is also likely to give China even more leverage in this narrative battle. As for motivation and structure, many donors have actually emphasized that the search for a vaccine is long-term and have managed expectations about the likelihood for success. So it doesn't sound like they're in it for the short-term gain. It doesn't also sound like they're in it primarily to gain media attention. At the same time, donations from foundations are also quite likely to be more sustainable, given their more strategic perspective in their operations as well. And at the same time, we're likely to see this trend continue if donors actually, can see the benefit out of providing R&D philanthropy. So we've broken it down to 3 potential areas of benefit for donors. The first one being brand benefit, a rise in positive public sentiment around their donations, the possibility of a huge branding payoff if a vaccine or major breakthrough results from research. And secondly, political benefit, strengthen political status of companies associated with the COVID-19 breakthrough projects. At the same time, the government is likely to be appreciative of these contributions as well. And then finally, market benefit, IP rights for donors if they've brokered such an agreement with the recipients, and an access to commercially valuable data as well as the opportunity to diversify into profitable new areas. And And looking internationally, scientific research for health, it's actually a pretty niche area, even among philanthropists globally. Governments are still by far the largest R&D funders. So Bill and Melinda Gates, for instance, they're standout figures in this field. And we do believe that the rise in Chinese science to a level where it can challenge even the best in the world is really creating a key moment of opportunity. And once again, a trend we're hoping will continue well beyond the pandemic. So in conclusion, why is this trend significant? Well, we've identified 3 key reasons, really. Firstly, we believe this shows a shift in ambition from a responsive model where donations are made largely in reaction to emergencies or disasters to a more strategic one in China. And secondly, we really see this representing an expansion of scope, moving away from a low-tech affair to embracing innovation. And finally, showing an acceleration of maturity in China's philanthropy sector. We're seeing willingness of donors to invest in projects with uncertain return and years-long scale. And finally, I believe likely, or hopefully a question on many of your minds at this point, what are the needs and opportunities? How can I plug in or contribute? So we also see a couple of different ways. While the sector in China is indeed maturing, there's still a major expertise gap to be filled. Investment in R&D especially is very much long-term and is going to require experienced scientists, GR professionals, and credible leaders. There's also more that can be done on structure to ensure a clear separation from corporate entities and independently run foundations to avoid conflicts of interest. And capital as well is very much a high-cost, high-spending area. There's also a question of how much capital would be needed to make a real impact. So these are all areas that we see significant potential for overseas expertise to contribute as well. So we've come to the end of my presentation at this juncture. Thank you very much for listening. And we have a Q&A segment right at the very end after the panel as well, where I can take any questions. But at the same time, we've got the QR code displayed right here, which you can scan to download the report.
Thank you, Angel, for sharing the highlights of the report. Now we'll start today's panel discussion, moderated by Andre Shen, founder and CEO of Bridge Consulting. Andre leads Bridge Consulting's business strategy and works with clients and partners to develop communication strategies that align with their interests and missions while advancing social good. Now I turn the mic to you, Andre.
Thank you, Cindy. Hello, everyone. This is Andre from Bridge Consulting. So first of all, let me say how delighted I am to see so many people attending today's webinar from so many different countries. I want to thank Cindy and the AVPN team for helping make this happen. Actually, when we started working on this report, our ambitions were relatively modest. We hope that it will be interesting to people in the philanthropic sector outside China. So it's fascinating, even surprising to see that this issue raised in the report are resonating with people from across such diverse backgrounds. Actually, we've received a number of questions in advance asking how our topic today relates to Pakistan, Thailand, or Indonesia, etc. Now, I should say upfront that I am not an expert on philanthropy in anywhere outside China. I also checked in with our panelists, and to be honest, none of us can speak with authority when it comes to comparing trends that you are experiencing in your own countries with what we describe in our report. However, I do think that we have some clear things in common. Most of us come from the emerging economies, meaning it's only in the last 20 to 30 years that large sections of our populations have moved out of poverty. These changes mean that we have also big disparities in societies. Some very wealthy individuals and companies, an emerging middle class, but large sections of population who have not yet benefited and remain poor. In other words, all of the conditions for the emergence of homegrown philanthropic movements. So I don't see this pandemic philanthropy we describe in our report purely as a domestic phenomenon in China with no bearing on the rest of the world. After all, COVID-19 is affecting all of us regardless of country or nationality. So this also raised the prospect for collaboration, for partnerships, exchanges between philanthropists, scientists, and researchers across borders. Therefore, I would warmly welcome the chance to discuss with any of you in the audience how we could work together on Bridge's future reports to explore common trends and dynamics across Asia. I'd like to remind you that while listening to our panel discussion, you can also send through your questions by clicking on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom. I will select questions and direct them to our panelists after the discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce you, our distinguished panelists, and begin our discussion today. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to turn on your videos so we can see you. Okay, so first, let me introduce Dr. Manchun Lu, Chief Operating Officer at Global Health Drug Discovery Institute, or GHDI, which is also our partner to present this webinar. Manchun joined GHDI in 2016. She worked on the organization's initial setup and has been responsible for its various operational functions as well as external engagement to support its R&D activities. She has diverse experience in business and management, scientific R&D, and NGO operation. Manchun was trained as a chemist with a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She also has an MBA degree from the Anderson School of Management, UCLA. Welcome, Manchun.
Thank you.
Next, Ms. Rui Xihao, Philanthropic Partnerships Program Officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Rui leads philanthropic partnerships work in China to improve the culture, policy, and infrastructure for philanthropic development. She has over 7 years of management consulting experience with Monitor Group, both at its Beijing and Cambridge offices. Before that, Rui worked with P&G. She holds a master's degree from the Harvard Kennedy School and a bachelor's degree from Guanghua School of Management, Peking University. Welcome, Rui. Last but not least, Mr. Vincent Zhang, Senior Researcher at Baidu Research, USA. Vincent leads the computational biology team at Baidu Research, USA. His research has mainly focused on RNA structure prediction, RNA design, protein structure prediction, and their medical applications. Recently, Vincent and his team developed linear design, a novel algorithm to improve mRNA vaccine stability and protein production. Vincent holds a master's degree in computer science from Oregon State University. Welcome, Vincent.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, Vincent. Okay, my first question is actually for all of the panelists. So maybe you can introduce more about yourself and your organizations, and how have your respective organizations responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, and what are some initiatives in the pipeline? So can we start with Manchun, then Rui Xi, and finally Vincent? Each of you will have about 2 minutes. Okay, Manchun, please.
Thank you, Andre, for the introduction. So hi, everyone. The Global Health Drug Discovery Institute, that's where I work for. We call it GHDI, or in a short, we call it GIDI. So the GIDI was co-funded by the Gates Foundation, Tsinghua University, and the Beijing municipal governments in 2016, almost 4 years ago. It is independent, not-for-profit, and also it's one of its kind research organization in China. We're located in Beijing, but have leveraged very extensively about global resources and drug discovery networks. We're committed to improving global health through accelerated drug discovery to tackle diseases that are disproportionately affects populations in developing countries. So in our pipeline, the majority of our projects are surrounded by TB, tuberculosis, malaria, EED, environmental enteric dysfunction, as well as other parasitic diseases, and of course, COVID-19 for this year. So at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak, as early as in January, our expertise in infectious disease drug discovery helped us quickly jump onto the topic and started several drug repurposing projects. We also launched the world's first online data portal to share coronavirus-related research data and findings. Also, we just a couple of months ago, we also launched a free AI virtual screening service to facilitate the worldwide COVID-19 drug discovery effort. At the same time, we opened our physical platform resources to the science community and established a series of collaborations worldwide. And more recently, we actually launched a longer-term preparedness initiative, including six new drug, antibody, and vaccine projects. Funding-wise, because we're talking about a philanthropic contribution in China, GHDI used to be solely funded on or through a PPP model, the public-private partnership model, which is also a very innovative mechanism in China. So far, GHDI is still the only research organization in China supported through this mechanism. And we have been actively seeking additional funding sources in the past couple of years. And this year, thanks to Tencent Foundation, we received our first donation outside the PPP model. And the Tencent helped us to to sponsor our COVID-19 projects. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Menchun. And then Racy, please.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you, AVPN team. As Andre introduced, I'm Rishi. I'm the program officer of Philanthropy Partnership Team, Gates Foundation, and based out of Beijing. My role is to work with partnerships to improve philanthropic giving in China by improving giving culture, policy, infrastructure, and I work with philanthropists, researchers, and intermediaries, infrastructures, and media partners to enable more and intentional giving in China. Gates Foundation, as many of you might know, is a family foundation set up by the Gates family in 2000. And in 2006, Warren Buffett committed to donate most of his wealth to the foundation too. During the COVID-19, Gates Foundation has responded in quite a few range of aspects, including protecting the most vulnerable communities and population around the world impacted by the virus. In terms of research and development, we invested in testing, which is diagnostics, investing in partners who are developing next generation diagnostic tools, including rapid tests that could be used at home or in a clinical setting. And in terms of treatment, Gates Foundation and Wellcome Trust set up the COVID-19 Therapeutic Accelerator, which is a global collaboration on funding and coordination for therapeutic R&D. The goal is to identify potential treatments, fast-track development, and prepare for the manufacturing of treatment for millions. And in terms of prevention, it is mostly on vaccine development and supporting GAVI and CEPI in terms of R&D and distribution around the world. Throughout all the efforts, we really look into firstly equity to ensure the efforts across the regions. We will focus on the tools and treatment and vaccines that can be used and manufactured at large scale and in low resource settings. In terms of resilience, we hope to build resilience not just for COVID-19, but also for future pandemics. And we know we will be prepared for the next response and for the future. Another worthwhile mentioning initiative of Gates Foundation in the US is Power of Initiative. It is an opportunity to galvanize giving and strengthen infrastructure of giving. The initiatives helped to set up a platform that helped everyday giving to donate to opportunities related to COVID-19. And also another platform is to facilitate high net worth individuals to give opportunities to COVID-19. And also the foundation set up an emergency fund, which is a momentum fund with partners in the US to support impacted COVID-19 and related nonprofits and vulnerable communities. It's a very broad range of activities. I would like to share more in the future if you'd like to understand more, but now I will pause. Thank you. And
thank you. Thank you, Reishi. Okay, finally, Vincent, please.
Thanks, Andre, and hello, everyone. This is Vincent He Zhang. I'm a senior researcher in Baidu Research and currently lead the computational biology team. Baidu Research is one of the top AI research institutes. We focus on future-looking research in AI, and our team aims to bring the cutting-edge AI technology to medical fields. Since late January, Baidu announced to set up a 300 million help for pandemic prevention and public health security in response to the outbreak of COVID-19. And our team also shifted our focus to COVID-19 related research and projects. We cooperated with China CDC to build Baidu CDC workstation. And as Andrew just mentioned, we also developed an AI algorithm which can help to increase the stability of mRNA vaccine. Today, I'm glad to share my experience in a technical researcher perspective on how we use AI technology to help fight COVID-19. Thanks.
Thank you, Vincent. Okay, so now today we have three panelists from different backgrounds, from a research institute funded through a PPP model, and from a donor, and from a private institution whose funding is primarily from a commercial source. So next, I will ask each of you different questions. Each of you will have about 5 minutes. I do want to leave some time for Q&A, so please pay attention to the time. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Okay, first, I'd like to ask Reishi. So although our report covers some, I want to know what are your observations or thoughts on the evolution of China's philanthropic sector. What do you think are the contributing factors to this new trend of giving that we're talking about today? And what do you think are the key challenges to maintaining this trend? So I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for the question. Indeed, in the past few months, starting from late January and February, many foundations, corporate foundations, family foundations, who are our long-term partners, came to Gates Foundation asking questions about, well, you, as Gates Foundation, you are have been an expert in the field for quite a while. Indeed, we do have been working on public health issues across the world and in China for quite a while. So partners came to us asking about any potential opportunities and any learning or about the sector, partners, etc. So from that lens, I was very lucky and fortunate in the process to have been in deep conversations with many of the leading foundations listed in Andre's report. And for the, I will not mention their exact name, but I will probably share some examples and data that is useful for everyone to understand some kind of a quote-unquote insider observation. So firstly, regarding the data, it is quite public and it's collected by China Charity Alliance. During the COVID-19 months, a total of about 42 billion RMB from over 400 private and public enterprises have donated. So it's like 42 billion RMB, and among which about 60% are contributed by the private companies, private enterprises, and individuals, making up about 21 billion RMB. Which is a very large portion out of the overall donation. So if we look into the private donors and we look into the top donors, like what Andre's report has also listed, we would notice that firstly, a majority of them are responding to support PPE, just like the previous survey Andrew had collected. that a majority of them are donating to PPE, which is the most urgent, and the disaster relief, which is also a general trend in previous China's disaster phase that we see. But we do see a number of donors showed interest in supporting systematic solutions. They are thinking about, okay, beyond donating PPE, beyond responding to very urgent needs of medical staff, of hospitals, what can we do to address this very large impact and badly impacted world by the pandemic? So they are investing in R&D and investing in public health issues and think about what are the root causes of that, which was very encouraging for, at least for me, to see the trend. So for example, there are about, let's see, we looked into the top dozen, about 12, 13 private enterprise donors who donated largest, including Alibaba Foundation, Tencent Foundation, ByteDance, etc. So we looked into 12 of them, and we found out that 9 of them are supporting medical staff, and 7 of them are supporting hospital needs, and 9 are supporting PPE and medical devices, and 4 out of the 12 are supporting vulnerable groups, like the pregnancy, elder, and young, impacted by the pandemic. And 4 are supporting and donating to global AIDS. And lastly, about 6 are supporting R&D. So look out of that, because many of them are investing multifacets. So across the board, this report is about R&D, but many of them are picking 3 or 4 other areas to invest. And among them, we do see that it's a promising trend. I did a small calculation. Andre's report, the Bridge Consulting's report, calculated that it is about 1.87 billion of R&D invested out of the pandemic. So if we do the division of 1.87 out of 42 billion, which is about close to 5% given to R&D. That's actually a pretty promising number, because if we look into 2018's overall giving of China, we would notice that 1.3% is given to R&D. So that's for the whole year of 2018, out of the 140 billion RMB donated. We know that only 1.3 is given to R&D. And out of COVID-19 pandemic, we see about 5%. So comparatively, it is pretty promising. Another number for reference is that also Angel's report has also shared about, like in 2018, about 20% were given to health, to public health, which is following the trend of giving to education about 29%, given to poverty alleviation about 20-ish, 24%. So the third place is health. But if we look into health, it is not about R&D, it is about mostly drug donation. And the biggest, one of the biggest receiver is the Charity Federation. The large number is donated to drug and especially cancer drug. And another large foundation is China Cancer Foundation. So we see that in general, it's more about in-kind donation, which is great. But advocating for investing for larger donation for R&D is a long haul. So
yeah, sorry, Rishi, sorry to interrupt you. So what are the challenges do you see, and how do you think the Gates Foundation can help?
Thank you. I will quickly wrap up on that. So R&D is not easy because it needs large amounts of investment, and it is long-term, and it is high risk in a way of return. Because if you invest in like education, you see the results and you see the direct impact and the beneficiaries. But if you invest in R&D, it is kind of something invisible and something uncertain that you cannot see immediate outcome of that. And so that's why up to now, most R&D investment are from the state and from corporates like pharmaceuticals. So for the factors, I would say the challenge is to firstly to understand or having deeper knowledge and broaden understanding of the impact of R&D and the role it plays in the long-term and system change. For that part, we would we have held a few webinars on that, and we would really keep working on that. And also a contributing factor is the professional teams. If we look into those foundations and the family corporate foundation or the teams, they're all very highly professional and well-managed foundations. All of them, not mention any of their name, but I know like many of them are working day and nights because they are working like China team, like for example, Baidu here, they are in the US team, so day and night shifts and nonstop, and they're really quick respond in donating and identifying issues, identifying partners. So very respectful teams. So keep investing in talents, keep supporting and giving them the space to lead and to think. It's also needed in the sector. And lastly, in terms of the keep working on challenges, also the environment and the policy. We do have very positive policies in China to encourage giving by corporates and by individuals. But we need to do more on that. Realizing, for example, non-cash donation, realizing implementation of the policies. So I will pause there because we have more time and leave time for other panelists. So back to you, Andre. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Racy. It's always great to hear expert insight from insiders. So thank you for your comments. So next, I'm turning to Manchun. So we know that there are a few other medical research institutes in China who have received private donations. So how does GHDI plan to raise funds from private donors? What are your competitive advantages that are appealing to these emerging new donors? Manchun. Manchun, I think you need to turn on your audio. No, we can't hear you. Yeah.
Good? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think in terms of fundraising, I guess there's no trick. When I say no trick, because as the organization seeking for donation, we have to have a very inspiring vision that we truly believe in. And we need to have a very clear business about how we're going to achieve our vision. And the rest is all about people, how to find them and engage them, inspire them as well, and win their trust and convince them what we do is actually profoundly meaningful and worthy of their philanthropic investment. And as for the first two parts, the vision and our clear business case, we know what we do. We do it all the time. And we have a well thought and a concrete research plan. And we know clearly what we aim to deliver in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. So then I think that the most challenging part still remain as people. The challenges are still humongous, as you and Reishi just mentioned. I think we have seen a very good trend, but there do remain a few very systematic issues. I don't want to repeat it because Reishi has already mentioned it before. So for example, I think research in China is never ever, traditionally, it's not considered as a social welfare. So that needs actually philanthropic support. So people normally believe research, fundamental research, teaching, education, higher education, that's the government, the business. The government should fund it, and which has a history about that, because previously in China, the research entities in China is about the universities and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and those are solely supported pretty much by the government funding, and all the private money has come to the basic education, rural education, disaster relief, poverty alleviation. So and also I want to echo what Reishi just mentioned. Donors are not very clear about what to expect from their contribution if they support the research. So it's just not as real as helping one student, a specific student, a teacher, a school, a building with your name branded on it. So all of these are very hard. So actually, from the beginning of this year, we spent a lot of time to try to educate the public as well as some of the corporations to let them know, to help the R&D, to help developing new drugs, vaccines is actually a long-term thing. It's good to see the 5% donation come to R&D, but truly R&D is a long-term strategic investment. So we always reflect on the lesson of SARS. 17 years ago, we thought it is gone, but then it come back again. And now most of us believe, the pandemic and other viral threats will come from time to time. So we actually need constant support from the philanthropic sector. So I think that's my take on this question.
Thank you, Manchun. So besides monetary contributions, what does GHDI need in order to grow and develop in a sustainable and impactful manner, do you think?
Yeah, I think GHDI is a very special institute. I think it's just a tryout, like our little lab mouse. So it's still one of its kind of research organization in China. And we have already had several major policy breakthroughs, but definitely from policy-wise, we will need additional policy support. We really hope that these type of research organization of a sort of like a private nature will truly be integrated into the China's research community. And so that we can have systematic support from the government, from the corporation, as well as in terms of talent, in terms of research funding and the tax benefit, etc. And also, we hope that we can enhance our global awareness, and so that we can attract more global support from outside China. We hope to let people know that there are a group of brilliant scientists and doing great science in China, in Beijing, and trying to solve some most challenging diseases that affecting the majority of the population on the earth. And the good thing is that we have already participated some global efforts on COVID-19 and some antiviral efforts. We joined the CARE consortium supported by the European, the EU system, even though at a very small scale. But we certainly hope that we will seek opportunity, to really contribute the antiviral global research effort at a more specific, a more larger scale. Yeah.
Thank you, Manchun. So, okay, now Vincent, thank you for your patience. So, something I'm sure that is on our minds from a researcher's point of view. What are your current observations on COVID-19 vaccine development? I know your work is pretty much focused on the mRNA approach, which has not been approved for any medicine. So we also received questions asking about collaboration between researchers. So you just mentioned you have a partnership with China CDC. So I wonder if you can share more about how did you just work with public health professionals, and how did you manage to work with people who might know very little about digital technology and give them what they really need? Vincent.
Thanks, Andre. For the vaccine question, we see that several vaccine companies and research institutes have launched COVID-19 vaccine development, and some of them have entered clinical trials. For example, on late July, Moderna announced that their ongoing COVID-19 vaccine, mRNA-1273, started phase 3 clinical trial. Among the vaccines that are under development, there are basically two different types. One is a traditional protein-based vaccine, and the other is a new type mRNA vaccine. Compared with protein-based vaccines, mRNA vaccine is much faster for mass production because it does not require out-of-body antigen development. Also, there is no risk of infection for mRNA vaccine. All of these advantages make MR vaccine a promising approach for current COVID-19 pandemic. And we noticed that in the vaccine development competition, some companies such as Moderna, they focus on MR vaccines. But as you just mentioned that the history of MR vaccine is short, just about 10 years. And for now, there is no MR vaccine in the market. Some issues such as how to design the delivery systems and how to increase the thermodynamic stability of MR vaccines are challenging. Recently, our team in Baidu Research has developed an algorithm, linear design, to efficiently design mRNA sequence to increase the thermodynamic stability of MR vaccine. We hope that our AI algorithm can help MR vaccine development, both for COVID-19 vaccine and for other disease vaccines. And for another question, our partnership with China CDC, here is the process. At late January, Baidu reached the China CDC to see what we can do for help. Based on their needs, we proposed to build a COVID virus analysis platform, which can do genome sequencing, mutation analysis, and evolutionary platform. Evaluationary analysis altogether. At April, Baidu and CDC signed a partnership agreement, and we set up a joint workstation. With this workstation, we help solve the CDC's urgent need. And at June, when Beijing encountered a small COVID-19 outbreak, this workstation helped to sequence and analyze the virus full genome within 24 hours. As you just said, it is very important to have good communications for experts in different fields. Actually, it is a process that we knew better and better about what CDC needs specifically. We set 3 technical meetings in a row. At the first meeting, we presented our previous research and showed our ability of using AI technology to help analyze virus genome. And CDC is very interested and convinced by our AI ability and share with us some issues they faced. And we did some research after the meeting and came up with some ideas. And we proposed the solutions at the second meeting. And finally, at the third meeting, we polished the proposal and decided to create a genome analysis platform. So you can see that a well-organized communication process is very important. And we also follow this to make a success. Thanks.
Thank you. So now I'm going to open the floor to questions from the audience. So we have received a number of good questions. So I will just say the question out loud, and whoever wants to take that question, please let me know. So the first one is from Jenny Rovello. So does Chinese philanthropy for COVID-19 R&D efforts come with commitments for companies or institutions to ensure fair pricing for the vaccines and treatments in development in China? Also, how is Chinese philanthropy contributing to global initiatives such as the WHO-led access to COVID-19 tools, which aims to ensure equitable access for COVID-19 diagnostics, vaccines, and treatments? So thank you for your question, Jenny. And I wonder our panelists want to take this question. Gracie?
Thank you, Andre. I can take a quick tap on this one. Thank you for asking the question, Jenny. I think you were asking a question about how Chinese philanthropists are contributing to global multi-collaboration and multilateral mechanisms. One quick example from China is the Bite Dance. They donated $10 million to GAVI. Angel also mentioned GAVI in her presentation. GAVI is a global mechanism supporting fair distribution of vaccine. So they will play a role to purchase vaccine on a fair price and negotiate the price, and also in a way help the companies to gain WHO pre-qualification and to ensure their manufacturing and fair distribution among needy countries, especially low-resource countries. So ByteDance donated $10 million to that one. So it is a rare example, but a very encouraging one. Thank you.
Thank you, Reishi. I see Mantra also turning on your audio. Do you want to comment?
Actually, not on this one, but in terms of the fair pricing, I just want to use an example of the Gates Foundation's global access term. So normally, when we sign up to accept the foundation's support for research, we always, like make the commitment that we are going to make the final product affordable for people who are in need, even though it's a long stretch, far away from from the discovery to a real drug, but that's the commitment we all made.
Thank you, Mantran. Okay. Okay, so the next question is from Hugh Thomas. So hi, please comment on the relative intra and inter-organizational collaboration of researchers in national research institutes, companies, and universities in Europe, US, and China, and how this affects the efficiency and the effectiveness of developing COVID-19 testing, treatment, and immunization solutions. How can the non-government organization and corporate sectors make cooperation more effective? Okay, so I think maybe Reishi can also respond to this question. And since Vincent, you're from the corporate sector, so maybe you can also comment.
No, Vincent, could you go first? I'm not an expert on R&D, but yeah, please go first.
Okay, Vincent.
Okay, thanks. Actually, for the linear design project, we do have a corporate. We have a corporation.
Sorry, Vincent, you are breaking up a little bit. So.
And Professor David Matthews, and he expert in. I'm sorry, can you hear me better?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Please continue.
So maybe I'll chip in here until Vincent come back to the line again. So as I mentioned in January, actually during the Chinese New Year, we opened up our the physical platform resources. Since then, we GHDI, our organization, received over 100 collaboration requests from around the world. And eventually, we actually established about 10-ish collaboration projects with a variety of actually entities from both in China and outside China, with Saudi Arabia, with American companies. So I would say, and also I mentioned, we just recently joined the CARE Consortium. It's an international alliance, actually 5-year project targeted small molecule COVID-19 drug discovery. It includes, I think, 37 international companies and universities and not-for-profit organizations. So actually we see there is a huge collaboration among the international scientific community. And I do believe, in terms of encountering this pandemic outbreak, we do need collaboration among different governments and organizations. And also for our online portal, the data portal, as well as the free AI service, the virtual screening service, we actually collaborated with Alibaba. Yeah. So I truly see, the synergy among between the corporation and the universities. And just to echo Vincent just mentioned, actually, when I tour around the CDC lab, I do see their lab you know, they make a huge contribution, the sequencer, during the second outbreak of COVID-19 in Beijing just a month ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Mention, for chipping in. So Vincent, now we can see you, so please continue.
Yeah, sorry, I just dropped out because of the bad connection. Yes, for our linear design project, we do have a cooperation with other labs. We cooperated with Professor David Matthews from University of Rochester. He is an expert in RA research field, and when he heard our ideas about how we can use AI technology to increase the stability of mRNA vaccines, he's very interested, and we started to cooperate on this project, and he gives us some very good suggestions, and he's also the co-author of our paper.
Thank you, Vincent. Okay, so Reishi, actually there is a question specifically for you, and she wanna to hear your thoughts on what similarities or differences you observe between Chinese and traditional Western philanthropy during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you for the question, Jenny, again. This is a great question, because we always are thinking about the question of what Chinese philanthropy would grow into. Will Chinese philanthropy grow up and grow into something like the Western philanthropy? From my experience and thinking, I would say that would not be. So your question is exactly what we have been keep thinking about. What are the similarities and differences? And definitely Chinese philanthropy will be a different creature. And during COVID-19 pandemic, I do observe some commonalities. Of course, first one is generosity and care for the humanity and care for the vulnerable communities. That came up very obvious. Like when we talk about R&D today, it is rare, both in China and in other culture, because as mentioned, it is not like a common investment area of philanthropy. So we would say that rare, both in China and in other cultures. However, like because China is still like emerging, so our size is relatively small as well. Like the overall size of China's giving is 1/20th of US. So think about that. Carrying that back to exact topic, that will almost carry the same proportion. But at the same time, we do see that commonality of caring for communities, because out of the pandemic, the impact of virus and impact of public health issues are become more visible to philanthropists. So they see it is impactful to their community, to their very close family, friends. So I would say that would raise a lot of caution and a lot of investment to both PPE to very disaster relief efforts. So we see those are very common and very heartwarming. And also we do see some in-kind donations across different regions. However, in terms of differences, China's giving largely are from corporates, less from individuals. That's in line with, in general, donation structure of China as well. About 23, 22 are from individuals in China's giving, and about 63, 65 are from corporates. And in the US, majority, like 70% are from individual and only 5% from corporate. So that replicates in COVID-19 donation as well. But we do see more champions of giving to R&D in the US or in other countries, and even in Africa. We would love to see more champions. Of course, Andre's report has listed all the champions in China, and we do hope to see more of them coming up and keep investing in. Just like, yeah, this could be a trigger for more momentum coming up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Reishi. So due to the time constraint, I apologize for not being able to answer all questions, but feel free to contact any of us through AVPN network after this webinar. So we do want to continue this conversation with you after this webinar. So before ending this session, I'd like to invite all the attendees to the final poll, which will appear on your screen. And in the meantime, I want to invite our panelists to say some final words. Maybe each of you will have 30 seconds. So this time, let's begin with Vincent, and then Ruixi, and finally Manchun. Okay, so everybody please take the poll that is shown on your screen, and Vincent, please, some final words.
Okay, thanks, Andre, and thanks, everyone. I think this year is definitely going to be a tough year, and we hope that when we look back for 2020, we not only remember the terrible outbreak, but also remember the work that we have done to help prevent the outbreak. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Ruixi.
Thank you. I would say that although we see that it is very promising that more corporates and more individuals are looking into medical research for philanthropic investment, but I would say it is very early in its journey of understanding and supporting medical R&D. It definitely opens the mind and broadens the thinking about philanthropy through the pandemic, but we do need to work together to keep building the giving culture, improving policy, and investing in the giving infrastructures to maintain the momentum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruixi. Manchun?
As I just mentioned, I truly believe science has no border. So we are, in terms of this pandemic threats, we are all in this the challenge. So let's just do it together, and not only for 2020, not for today, but for a longer term, for a better global health for all the human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Manchun. Okay, so finally, Angel. So any final words?
Yeah, sure. I actually like to echo all the other panelists as well on the value of international collaboration. So we're happy to be speaking about Chinese philanthropy, but we really see this as a global effort, and we really hope to see collaboration continue regardless of what outside science kind of conversations look like. But yeah, we believe in collaboration, and we hope to see this continue.
Thank you, Angel. So now could we see the result of the final poll? Wow. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm happy to see the poll result that many of you believe this trend will stay. Yeah, and I look forward to working with you to make this happen. And again, thank you, Manchun. Thank you, Ruixi, Vince, and Angel for this fantastic panel discussion. And thank you all. Okay, so Cindy, over to you.
Thank you, Andre. Thanks to everyone for your participation in this insightful discussion, and thanks for all the panelists. As a global platform for investors for impact, AVPN supports our member organizations and partners in committing resources, identifying social investment opportunities across Asia, and making sense of the global pandemic efforts. Please visit the AVPN COVID-19 platform page shown on the screen to identify needs in Asia and take concrete actions to supply your resources and help bridge the gaps. On that note, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in today's webinar. Please stay safe and healthy. We look forward to seeing you again at our next event. Bye-bye.